Hello, listeners. It's Gunter Swoboda here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspire Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self development, and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspire Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked #1 in Australia and #5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts to listen and follow in 2024. With an average of 50,000 downloads per episode each week from listeners all around the world, our reach is significant and growing. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spigener-Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. I'm your host. Welcome back everybody to another episode of Inspire Change with Gunter. And I'm here to take you through some interesting places and thoughts and philosophies and psychologies. So what I thought I'd do is actually continue with the idea of ancient wisdoms and how they might shed some light on what's going on in today's world, because it's a funky, crazy old place at the moment. And I do believe that we're actually in serious peril. So in the last episode, I talked about the Buddhist creation myth and the relationship with what I'm talking about in Making Good Men Great. Now, I only know a smattering about Hinduism and its various myths. It's a very complex system. And I have to confess, I've not delved into it in any depth the way that I have with Buddhism. But I knew enough to sort of go, okay, let's go to that particular religious philosophical framework and see if it has something to say about what's going on in the world today. Because a lot of the ancient wisdoms do. It's not just Buddhism and it's not just Hinduism. There are others. In the Christian tradition, we talk about the Book of Revelations, but I never really related to that. To some degree, I saw that book as, the sort of meanderings of a very unwell mind. We talk about schizophrenia in particular. So to me, it was more of a psychological interest than of a philosophical or sociological sort of point of view. Okay, so what is it that I'm going to be talking about in today's podcast? And in this 20 minutes, I'm going to try and give you an overview of what is called the Kali Yuga. The concept of the Kali Yuga comes from the Hindu cosmology and refers to the last of the 4 yugas or ages in the cyclical progression of time. Now, according to the Hindu texts like the Puranas, the Mahabharata, each yuga represents a gradual decline in righteousness, moral values, and cosmic order. The Kali Yuga in particular is considered the age of chaos, strife, and degeneration, deeply marked by the erosion of virtue and the dominance of materialism, greed, deception, and selfishness. So, if we read the Kali Yuga, one of the things that we really clearly get from it is that there are some very distinct characteristics, as I've already hinted at. So let me go through those. There's 5 in particular. So the first one is moral decline. This is where the age of Dharma, righteousness, is at its weakest. Truth is distorted. Right? Now, I want you to think about that in what's been in the media of recent times, probably over the past 10, 12 years. Okay, so truth is distorted, i.e. we have, fake news. We have, an idea that we have a sort of, anybody's opinion is truth, But also we see that corruption is widespread and virtues like compassion and honesty are diminished and sometimes even held up to ridicule. The second characteristic is that the emphasis is on materialism. The pursuit of wealth, power, and sensory pleasures becomes the dominant focus, overshadowing spiritual values. And so one of the things I want to draw attention to is that the thing that we seem to value is that when someone is wealthy, they must be the holder of wisdoms. Okay, so let me draw your attention to Trump, Musk, these people who've managed to, collect a vast fortune, much, much more than anybody has ever held in the history of humanity or human civilization. They're suddenly seen as geniuses and as, the sort of font of all wisdom. But are they? The third characteristic is that of social disorder. Okay, so what we're looking at there is hierarchies and systems that previously upheld justice and order break down. Good example of that is, take a look at the United States Supreme Court. In this context, the powerful exploit the weak, right? So we have, for example, economically, the radical increase of CEO salaries that, where they walk away with $40-50 million in golden handshakes, but the average wage has not significantly increased over the last 25 years. And so what we're seeing is that social, political, and economic structures become unstable. Part of that we can see in the shift from centre to ultra-right. So the fourth characteristic is that of deception and of hypocrisy. Leaders, both political and spiritual, often engage in duplicity, and people become more and more prone to falsehoods, both personal and collective. So, let's look at, some of the corruption that we see amongst, evangelical leaders, cult leaders, amongst politicians. And the fifth characteristic is that of conflict and violence. Wars and conflicts become more rampant, and the idea of peace becomes more and more elusive as nations and communities fracture into competition and hostility. In the larger framework of Hindu cosmology, the Kali Yuga is not just a period of inevitable decline, but it's also seen as part of a cosmic cycle that eventually will lead to renewal as the wheel of time turns into the next Yuga, which happens to be Satya Yuga, which is an age of truth and harmony. So, in many respects, despite the fact that we appear to be stuck at the moment in this particular place, there is some optimism. So, what's my view, in contextualizing Kali Yuga and the current geopolitical situation? My view is that in many ways, the themes of the Kali Yuga resonate deeply with the modern global context, particularly geopolitics. Several parallels can be drawn between the mythological characteristics of the Kali Yuga and contemporary global issues. Now, let me stress, I am not religious. I'm purely interested in the insights of ancient civilizations and ancient wisdoms and how they may connect with what's going on today. So let's take a look at geopolitical disorder and the erosion of democratic norms, because that is what's happening. We are moving more towards autocracy, authoritarianism, dictatorships than we are in maintaining and shoring up democratic norms. Kali Yuga speaks of widespread social disorder, and today we see a global rise in political instability and the erosion of democratic institutions. Whether it's the increasing prevalence of authoritarian regimes, political corruption, or the weakening of liberal democracies, we are witnessing a crisis in governance. Major powers like the United States, which were once seen as strongholds of democratic norms, are facing internal divisions and political polarizations like never before. And it reflects the discord and chaos typical of the Kali Yuga. Now, the United States is not the only place where this is happening. Think about the UK and the process of Brexit, which was fundamentally based on lies. And in this context, the thing that's really, really important is the disinformation age. The sort of Russian bots, the Chinese bots that surreptitiously and covertly are influencing the onslaught on Western democracy. We know that the Russians interfered with the United States election and possibly are going to do it again. Now, another factor here is rising nationalism, competition and conflict. So, Kali Yuga is marked by combativeness and competition. Now, competition has been reinforced progressively in our culture through economics. The idea that, companies competing with each other do better, provide better service, and make things cheaper, which is inherently not true because, what we're presented with is a picture where actually, a very small number of megacorps own everything else. So they're not really competing. They're monopolizing. So countries like the United States, China, and Russia are increasingly engaged in competitive geopolitical maneuvering, not just in economics, but actually in a military sense, strategically and tactically. So whether we're looking at the South China Sea, the war in the Ukraine, or the tensions between India, Pakistan, these conflicts are rooted in territorial ambition and power struggles, which clearly aligns with the Kali Yuga's vision of endless conflict and acquisition. Additionally, the militarization and the threat of global conflict, nuclear armament, cyber warfare, and so on, reflect the growing instability and violence that Kali Yuga myths predict. Now, the next one is economic inequality and materialism, and I've already sort of touched on that. One of the defining features of Kali Yuga is materialism. It's a society obsessed with wealth and power at the expense of spiritual and moral values. Today, global capitalism has created unprecedented levels of wealth inequality. And in fact, neoliberalism's one of neoliberalism's core aims was in fact to destroy or to at least reduce the middle class. And that's exactly what it's done. And, the partnership between the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and to some degree the European Union has all been a participant in that reduction, that onslaught on the middle class. So the world's richest 1% owns a staggering proportion of global resources, whereas large proportions of the population continue to live in poverty. This excessive focus on acquisition, as well as the environmental degradation caused by unfettered industrialization and consumerism, fits the Kali Yuga narrative. And therefore, we also then need to look at the increasing dominance of large corporations and their influence over political and economic systems, a la Elon Musk and his ilk. And this has nothing to do with what's in the best interest of society. It is all self-interest. The other part that's really concerning, and we've been battling for a long time, is the environmental collapse. While ancient Hindu cosmology doesn't directly address environmental issues, the degeneration of natural harmony in the Kali Yuga can be seen as an analogy to the environmental crisis we face today. Climate change, deforestation, pollution, mass extinctions are stark reminders of how the degradation of Dharma, righteousness, has disrupted the balance between humanity and nature. So the climate crisis, exacerbated by greed and exploitation, speaks to the broader cosmological decline seen in Kali Yuga, where the natural world itself becomes imbalanced and hostile. So, the fifth point in this, which is crisis of values and spiritual decline, it's a feature, a core feature of the Kali Yuga. And that, it clearly addresses the erosion of spiritual and ethical values. In contemporary society, many critics argue that consumerism and secularism have overshadowed traditional religious and ethical systems. Now, I'm going to go on a limb here, and I'm going to take out religious values, because much of our conflicts over human history have actually been a result of religion. And the idea, especially the monotheistic religions, that my God is better than your God. Now, ironically, religion is supposed to provide an ethical system of relationships for people and communities, and therefore to bind communities, to bind people together. But what's happened is, for human psychological reasons, there's been simply a continuing level of fracturing between communities and cults and all sorts of other, conspiracy theories and so on. The idea is that religious and spiritual leaders who are supposed to guide humanity toward higher truths are more often than not embroiled in scandal, reinforcing the idea that even those who are meant to preserve Dharma have been corrupted. So, in all of this, is there a place to consider the role of masculinity? And again, the framework that I've been researching and putting together, which is the, Making Good Men Great framework, essentially provides a critical lens through which we can understand how men in particular can navigate the challenges of this age. We can see it in the characteristics of patriarchy, territory, hierarchy, acquisition, competition, combativeness. All these characteristics are heightened in the Kali Yuga. Modern masculinity is deeply implicated in perpetuating the very dynamics that drive this age of decline. Yet, these traits also offer a space for transformation. So, let me bring this podcast to a conclusion. What is it that I'm saying? Well, I'm saying that ancient wisdoms have actually got a really clear finger on the pulse of what the hell is going on in current geopolitical and economic settings. You know, the concept of Kali Yuga offers a mythic and philosophical framework to understand the current global landscape. The geopolitical reality we face today, which is marked by conflict, deception, environmental degradation, and materialism, mirrors the characteristics of the Kali Yuga as described in Hindu cosmology. However, just as the cycle of yugas holds the promise of renewal, the challenge of this era can be addressed through a conscious reimagining of values, part of which includes the transformation of masculinity into a force for constructive change. While Kali Yuga might represent the age of degeneration, it also offers the opportunity for profound spiritual awakening and transformation, urging us to confront these issues with courage and integrity. Now, spiritual transformation, the journey of change, is not dependent on a religion or ideology. We could quite literally search for the truths across the board and not confine ourselves to one framework. And I want you to think about this, because there's going to be some backlash from, people who are religious, people who belong to a particular, spiritual, denomination, for want of a better word. In my view, spirituality is independent of scriptures. It's independent of what gurus and leaders tell us. In Buddhism, the search is one from within. The Buddha himself did not like having his words written down because the emphasis was on personal transformation, the personal journey of change. So on that note, I'm going to leave you to it. Hope this has awakened some thoughts. Some of it's a bit scary, I know, but there is always a glimmer of hope. Sometimes it's a little flame that ultimately we need to fan into a raging bushfire, because we need to cleanse the corrupt stuff that's happened in our culture. Now, I'm not talking about this violently. I'm talking about this as a level of rising consciousness that we need to engage with. Do we really need $250,000 cars? As a couple, do I really need a house that has 7 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms? As an individual on my pursuit of a career, do I need to stomp on other people to get where I want to go? Do I need to lie and cheat? And the answer is an obvious no, we don't. And on that note, I'm going to leave you. Till next time, this is me, Gunter, signing off. Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.gunterswoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com.